Okay, so this happened to me about 2 years ago, and I still think about it more than I probably should. I used to work the night shift at a small 24-hour gym. It wasn't anything fancy, just a basic place with weights, some cardio machines, and a small front desk area. It stayed open all night, but after about midnight, it was usually dead. My shift was from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and most nights I'd maybe see 3 or 4 people total. Sometimes none at all. I didn't mind it. I'd just sit at the desk, scroll on my phone, wipe down equipment every once in a while, and keep an eye on the security cameras. The layout of the place was simple. When you walked in, there was the front desk immediately to the right. Straight ahead was the main gym floor with all the machines. To the left, there was a hallway that led to the locker rooms and bathrooms. There was also a small office behind the desk with a computer and a monitor that showed all the camera feeds. Around 1:30 in the morning one night, I noticed someone come in. That wasn't unusual, but what caught my attention was how he came in. Most people scan their key fob and walk right in. This guy scanned, opened the door, then just stood there, like he was deciding whether he actually wanted to come inside. I remember looking up from my phone and watching him for a few seconds. He finally stepped in, but he didn't look at me, didn't say anything. He just walked straight past the desk and into the gym. He looked normal enough, mid-30s maybe, average build, hoodie, sweatpants. Nothing about him screamed, problem. But there was something off about how slow he moved, like he was thinking about every step. I shrugged it off and went back to my phone. About 10 minutes later, I glanced up again and realized I couldn't see him anywhere on the gym floor. Now, the place wasn't that big. You could pretty much see everything from the front desk. So I leaned back a little and checked the mirrors, thinking maybe he was behind one of the machines. Nothing. That's when I turned to the camera monitor in the back office. I flipped through the feeds and eventually found him. Standing in the hallway by the locker rooms. He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, facing the wall. Not the locker room door, not the hallway entrance, just the wall. I remember staring at the screen for a second, trying to figure out what he was doing. It didn't make sense. If he was waiting for someone, he'd at least be looking toward the entrance. I told myself maybe he was on his phone or something, and I just couldn't see it from the angle. So I went back to the desk. Another 10 minutes passed, and something in my gut told me to check again. I pulled up the camera feed. He was still there, same spot, same position, still facing the wall. At that point, it started to get under my skin a little. I tried to rationalize it, but there's only so many explanations for someone standing completely still in a hallway at 2 a.m. I decided to walk back there just to see what was going on. As I stepped into the hallway, I could see him at the far end. And the weirdest part was, he didn't react to me at all. No shift in posture, no glance over his shoulder. Nothing. I got about halfway down the hall and said, "Hey man, everything good?" No response. I took a couple more steps. "Hey, you okay?" That's when he slowly turned his head toward me. Not his body, just his head. And he looked at me like he didn't recognize where he was. I don't know how else to explain it. It was like he had just snapped back into reality. He blinked a few times, then said, Yeah, I'm good." His voice sounded normal, but it didn't match the way he had been acting. I nodded and said, "All right, just making sure." Then I turned and walked back to the front. The whole thing felt off, but not enough to kick him out or anything, so I just kept an eye on the cameras. About 5 minutes later, I checked again. He was gone from the hallway. I scanned through the feeds, expecting to see him back on the gym floor. He wasn't there either. That's when I felt that drop in my stomach, because the only place left was behind the front desk. I turned around slowly, and sure enough, he was standing about 10 feet away from me, just outside the desk area. I have no idea how he got there without me hearing him. He was just there, watching me. I froze for a second and said, "Hey, what's up?" He didn't answer right away. He just kept staring. Then he said, "You're here alone, right?" That question hit me in a way I didn't like at all. I tried to play it off and said, "Nah, my manager's in the back." Which wasn't true. He held my gaze for another couple seconds, then gave a small nod. "Okay," he said. Then he turned and walked out, just like that. I watched him leave, waited until he was completely gone, and then locked the front door for the rest of my shift. Nothing else happened that night, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I had answered that question differently, things might have gone a very different way. The next story isn't mine, but it happened to a friend of mine who used to work security at an apartment complex. He worked the overnight shift, basically just patrolling the building and responding to noise complaints. The place had 6 floors, and most of the tenants were young professionals or college students. One night around 3 a.m., he got a call about someone knocking on doors on the 4th floor. That wasn't normal. Most complaints were about music or parties, not random knocking. So he took the elevator up and started walking down the hallway. As soon as he got off the elevator, he could hear it. Slow, deliberate knocking. Not aggressive, not loud, just steady. He followed the sound down the hall and eventually saw a guy standing outside one of the units. The guy would knock 3 times, wait about 5 seconds, then move to the next door and do the same thing. My friend called out, "Hey, can I help you?" The guy stopped mid-knock and turned around. He looked calm. Way too calm for someone knocking on random doors in the middle of the night. "I'm looking for someone," he said. "Who?" my friend asked. The guy paused for a second. "I don't remember," he said. That alone was weird enough. My friend told him he couldn't be knocking on doors like that and asked him what unit he was supposed to be going to. The guy just shook his head slowly. "I'll know it when I find it." At that point, my friend told him he needed to leave. The guy didn't argue. He just nodded and started walking toward the stairwell, but instead of going down, he went up, to the 5th floor. My friend followed him, keeping some distance. Same thing started happening again. Knock, wait, move, knock, wait, move, over and over. Eventually, someone opened their door and asked what was going on. Before my friend could answer, the guy leaned slightly forward and said, "I think you might be the one." That was enough. My friend stepped in, told the tenant to close the door, and escorted the guy out of the building. But here's the part that stuck with him. As they walked out to the parking lot, the guy said, "If it wasn't him, it would have been someone else eventually." My friend asked what he meant. The guy just smiled and said, "Doesn't really matter who answers." They called the police, but by the time they got there, the guy had already walked off into the darkness. Last one. This one happened to me more recently. I had just moved into a new apartment, and for the first couple weeks, everything was normal. Quiet building, no issues. Then one night around 2 a.m., I heard someone walking down the hallway outside my door. That wasn't unusual by itself, but what stood out was the pace. Slow, dragging footsteps, like someone was tired or not fully steady on their feet. I didn't think much of it until the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I waited, expecting to hear knocking. Nothing. Just silence. Then, a very light sound, like fingers brushing against the door. Not knocking, not scratching, just dragging lightly across the surface. I stayed completely still, listening. It went on for maybe 10 seconds. Then it stopped. The footsteps started again, slowly moving away down the hall. I got up and checked the peephole. There was no one there. I opened the door and looked both directions. Empty hallway. I told myself I imagined it. But the next night it happened again. Same time, same footsteps, same stop outside my door. This time I didn't move. I just listened. And right before the footsteps continued down the hall, I heard something else. A whisper. So quiet I almost didn't catch it. But it sounded like someone saying, "Not this one." I didn't open the door that time, and after that night, it never happened again. But I still think about it sometimes, because I don't know what would have happened if I had opened the door, and I'm not sure I want to know.